All right, joining us now with Big Ten softball getting set to start this week. You're going to see her a lot now, more, which is good, on the Big Ten Network. She's former Northwestern catcher, now, of course, Big Ten Network analyst. First time on In the Circle. We're fired up about that. Sammy Nettling joining us here. How you doing?
Doing well, Eric. Excited to be here.
Well, let's talk about this. Obviously, you're going to be you're part of the coverage on Big Ten Network, and the Big Ten gets going this weekend. We'll talk about how you ended up on Big Ten Network here in a little bit. But first, what has been your biggest takeaway from the teams in the Big Ten as far as the non-conference portion of the season? What has stood out to you?
I think the easy answer is I think for the first time in a long time coming into conference play, we have a team at the top that isn't a Michigan or a Northwestern or a Minnesota. It's Maryland and even beyond that. I mean, you look at just sort of the starts that some of these programs have had that have struggled in the past couple of years. Penn State, Rutgers. I mean, it almost feels like a completely new feel to the conference, and I'm excited. I'm excited for these matchups here in the coming weeks.
Yeah, let's first start with Maryland, a team you're going to see up close here coming up here when the season gets going this weekend. Mark Montgomery, what a job he's done at Maryland. They're ranked in the top 25, depending on where you look at the polls. They're in position to make the NCAA tournament. I know they had a really good conference season last season. Maybe that was the turning point for him. But what has stood out for you about what the Terrapins bring to the table, which has been one of the pleasant surprises, perhaps, to people that haven't followed the program closely?
For sure. I think their story really starts last year. Like you said, they had a great conference season. They ended up in the top four. They really felt like they were going to make a run in the Big Ten tournament, and they unfortunately matched up with a red hot Wolverines team in the tournament. But they were a team that was on the verge of really feeling like they deserved a berth in NCAA. So you look at just the momentum, they've carried it into this year. I mean, they had an unbelievable opening weekend, 2 ranked wins against Oregon and Oklahoma State, really kind of put their name on the map nationally. And yeah, I think in his 4th year, you have a program that has a lot of veterans now that are really starting to believe and buy into the system that he's building there, and really believing that they're a contender in the Big Ten, and they're entering from non-conference atop of the standings.
It's really been a remarkable story there. I mean, what was, and I think people wondered, can it work there in Maryland? Can you win in Maryland in the Big Ten? Can he win there? And they've been proving some critics wrong there.
They have, and last year they did a lot just with playing scrappy softball, right? One base at a time. Really, they continue the theme this year. They always like to steal a lot of bases. That's how they kind of get their offense going, and they really rely on their pitchers in the circle. And they have 2 solid pitchers, really like veteran arms, and then they got a freshman in the mix as well. So they're really putting the pieces together. They've increased their power numbers this year. So they're really putting together a solid piece of work, 1 through 9, all 3 facets of the game. And it's showing in the win-loss column.
Yeah, they're going to open play at Indiana. You'll see some of that series on Big Ten Network. You're going to be a part of that. Maryland and Indiana, there is that coverage. Of course, the team everybody talked about going into the season, it's a team you know well, is Northwestern. Obviously, fresh off the trip to the World Series last year. They bring back the core of that team, Danielle Williams and company. It's been an interesting non-conference for them. The win-loss record perhaps not where they thought it would be, partly because they have played arguably one of the toughest schedules in the country, but yet I don't think it's gone as smooth as maybe some people on the outside thought. What's been your thoughts on the Wildcats here as they begin their defense of the Big Ten regular season title this weekend, hosting Minnesota?
I think you can look at their non-conference schedule in 2 different lights. You can see the win-loss column as it is, right? I think they're 7th right now, or even below that, entering Big Tens. They've only have 13 wins on the season, but you look at some of the losses that they took against some really strong opponents, right? Almost every single one of their losses came against a ranked team at the time, and those losses, when you start to rack them up, can really start to weigh you down confidence wise. And I've actually been really impressed that this Northwestern team that came into this season with expectations galore coming off of their 22 campaign have not lost their confidence despite the losses that they've racked up a little bit. And they I think they've won 7 of their past 10 games, and they're really starting to fire on all cylinders. And I also think it's a different Northwestern team, right? Where we're not seeing Danielle Williams have the inning count that she had last year. And I actually think that's really good for them. You see a Cammie Henry, a transfer coming in and getting complete game shutouts for them. You have a Lauren Boyd who just 3-hit Oklahoma despite them taking the loss. So for the first time in a while, you're seeing almost an old Northwestern that is a typical pitch by committee type of program. And I think that depth that they're developing as Danielle starts to find her groove again and picks up the innings that we know she's inevitably probably going to pick up, I think this is still a very dangerous team. And across the board, looking at talent alone, they still are in my opinion, the favorite in the Big Ten.
Yeah, top 10 RPI. So the schedule's paid off there. And there's something to be said, right? Saving her, developing the other pitchers because it pays off once to get to conference and then postseason. Obviously, this team has big aspirations. They're still the favorites. Who were the teams you thought and still think perhaps could be the biggest threat to Northwestern in the Big Ten for the Big Ten title?
Nebraska was my number one going back to last year. I think the turnaround season that they had, they, again, like a Maryland, are just capitalizing on the momentum that they had in 2022. They return Courtney Wallace, their ace. They pick up a transfer that's becoming a solid 2 for them, and they have still this explosive offense as always. And again, they had credit Coach Ravel and the rest of the Nebraska coaching staff. They challenged this team with their non-conference schedule in preseason. And again, like Northwestern, they have not wavered despite picking up some losses against some very good teams. So I think they're a super well-rounded team from offense and pitching wise. So they're definitely up there for me. I think Maryland, you have to throw their name into the conversation at this point for sure. And then you have some really interesting teams that don't get talked about a lot in the Big Ten. You have a Penn State, you have a Rutgers. Granted, these are 2 teams that, unlike the rest of the conference, we haven't really seen them play a lot of ranked teams. So I'm really excited to see how that transfers over to conference play. But there's a lot of different names in the mix right now. I still think Michigan is going to be tough to beat. And then you have a lot of bracket busters. You have an Iowa that's going to pick up a game against people. You have a Minnesota that's been very quiet and very sneaky, but is really putting together a solid season. So it's tough. It's hard to say right now. I'm excited to see a lot of these teams a little bit more up close in the coming weeks. But I think it's going to be, for the first time in a while, there is not a clear outright favorite coming into conference that you feel is just going to dominate the entire competition.
It's a league that's currently ranked fifth best conference in college softball, fresh off a year where they made 7 bids in the NCAA tournament. And I know a lot of coaches feel that momentum there from last year and after having to chip that shoulder from the year prior where they felt they got shorthanded. Where do you feel right now, somebody who's played in the league, about where the Big Ten is today in softball? Is it at better now than ever before? I know in talking to Kelly Kovac-Shanley, she feels this is the best depth that the Big Ten's ever had. How do you feel about the Big Ten?
I think depth-wise, absolutely. You look at, again, you just have, you only have 1 team right now under 500, and you have 7 teams coming into conference play that have won like 7 of their past 10 games. I mean, you really are seeing these teams not get bogged down by early non-conference losses. And you're also seeing the conference finally, I would say, like across the board, 1 through 14, going out and playing solid non-conference competition, despite the fact that they may be racking up some losses. That's what they need to do, right? A Nebraska, in order to get themselves in a top 25 competition, right? Or ranking conversation. They need to go out and play those teams. Northwestern needs to continue to go out and play those teams. Michigan needs to continue to go out and play those teams. And now you're seeing across the board, Iowa picked up a ranked win, Wisconsin picked up a ranked win. And that's also the way that the conference gets national recognition from those other conferences and those other coaches and voters, et cetera. So I agree. I think depth wise, 100%, I think it's going to be an interesting year with no clear favorite. It's going to be really up for grabs. And I think for the first time, I don't think you're going to see as many sweeps in conference play as you have done previously. You're going to see a lot. It's going to be significantly harder to get a sweep. It's going to be significantly harder to beat a team 3 times in a row. And it's going to definitely cause some chaos towards the end of the season.
We've spent this much time talking Big Ten. Haven't brought up Michigan. It's unique year for Michigan. It's life after Carol Hutchins, who announced her retirement in the offseason. Bonnie Thole was promoted. They've played a challenging schedule. They got a young team over there. I want to first ask you about Coach Hutch, though. I mean, when you think Big Ten, her name comes up pretty quickly. You have had the privilege of playing against her and covering her as a media person. What's your thoughts on Coach Hutch?
Oh man, Coach Hutch is she's in rare company for sure. And I also growing up in Tucson had the opportunity to be in the backyard of Coach Candrea my whole life growing up. And the two of them are the same for me. They built this sport, right? Specifically Hutch brought it past east of the Mississippi, right? She was the first one to win east of the Mississippi. Before that, it was a West Coast sport through and through. And you look at just the parity nationally that you're seeing in the sport today, Hutch was instrumental in that. And I think she's one of the fiercest competitors. You always knew a Michigan team with Hutch at the helm was going to give you a run for your money. And there's a reason they were so dominant for so many years. I mean, she finished her career. I don't think she had a single season where she finished sub 500. I mean, just legacy, champion, pioneer, advocate for the sport, all of the terms that describe Hutch. I just tip of the cap to her. It was such an honor to play for her or play against her, excuse me, and again get to cover her as an analyst, kind of on the other side of the coin. It was a lot of fun.
Any stories of covering her as a media person? What was that experience like?
I covering as a media person was interesting because the Big Ten is a very close conference, right? You get to know them, the coaches as players, as competitors, and you always knew that there's far people that hate losing as much as Hutch. So my favorite part of covering her is when her team is down and they're not playing so hot, and she just does not want to get on the mic, right? She doesn't want to talk to you because she's focused. She's got one goal, and it's quite frankly not to talk to us, not to tell the story of what the team's doing wrong at that moment. She's just trying to get her team to refocus and get back in the game. So she's pretty notorious for that, but it's just hilarious because it's just her as the competitor, and it's Hutch to a T, and yeah, it's always fun when you got to call a game when Hutch was on the field.
What's your thoughts on Bonnie Toll taking over and this young Michigan team? I saw them in Clearwater in person. I think they're growing each day. And I actually don't expect them to miss a beat. Coach Toll bleeds the colors of played at Michigan. I think the message is the same, and I think I think Michigan's a team that I feel like has been ignored here in this Big Ten. Like I still think they could be a factor. Am I naive on that, or is the youth still an issue? Or what's your thoughts on the Wolverines? I know they lost a lot.
Yeah, they lost a lot, and they lost a lot to the transfer portal too. So I think that's the other thing that's playing into the cards for them this year. Really trying to figure out who are their leaders going to be. They still have some vets that they can always rely on, right? Alexi Blair comes to mind. That I think the difference between Michigan this year versus previous years is in the circle through and through, right? I mean, they went how many years in a row with an All-American in the circle for them. So it's big shoes to fill for that pitching staff. But I agree with you. I think they're going to be competitive. No team under Coach Stoll, no team that represents Michigan is ever going to, get walked over in conference. So I do think they're still going to be highly competitive. It's just a matter of, can they, again, not waver in their confidence based on how they started the season, and can they really get the ship running in the right direction here for this second half.
Michigan will begin Big Ten play, Bonnie Toll, at Ohio State against Kelly Kovac-Shingley, a former Wolverine herself. In fact, her and Bonnie Toll, they know each other for a long, long time. They there was currently the campus visits there, Shingley and Bonnie Toll there, so they're very tight, very fitting. They would open up. I want to ask you about the Buckeyes. They lost Lexi Hanley to graduation. They certainly had a coaching change there as far as personnel, with Whitney Jones coming in to run the offense after Jordan Clark got the head coaching job at Florida Atlantic. Fresh off, they still got Hackenbrack to lead that offense, but certainly the question was, who replaces Lexi Hanley? What's your thoughts on the Buckeyes this year?
I do think pitching is their biggest question mark. And you have an Allison Smith who has been around and has contributed ever since her freshman year. And this is her first year to really step into that ace, that number one position, right? And I think she's got a heck of an offense, just like they did last year. Hackenbrack, Wilkinson, putting up crazy numbers. So they just need to figure out how to limit the damage, right? I think any time that pitching staff and Smith, as the one who's going to get the most innings for them, anytime they can limit an opponent to sub 4 runs, I think their offense has a legitimate chance to win that game. So I agree that's their biggest question mark, but I'm excited to see, how they put things together here in conference.
Minnesota and Wisconsin, two teams have, Wisconsin got back to the tournament last year. Minnesota's kind of become a perennial tournament team. Sort of queshed up and down this season a little bit. Wisconsin obviously has Maddie Schwartz, has Schwartz coming back in the circle there. Took a kind of loss early in the year that you kind of shook their head, but they've kind of righted the ship, beat Alabama recently. And then Minnesota just beat Wichita State. They lost some personnel, but they got obviously Autumn in the circle there. What's your thoughts on those two teams, the Gophers and the Badgers?
I think Minnesota specifically, I think, has a legitimate shot. Not that Wisconsin doesn't. That's not what I'm saying. But I think Pease today reminds me a lot of the way that she pitched in 2021 when she was the 2 to Pfizer. I think she's really confident. I think she struggled a little bit last year when she was looked at as the solid number 1. And she seems to really have found her groove again. And they were another team that was hurt by the transfer portal in the offseason, but they have a Natalie Den Hartog who's going to continue to put up big power numbers for them. They have a strong offense, and again, they're a veteran team who knows how to win, who knows how to put series in this conference together and rack up series wins. That's really what it's going to be about. Who can get who can win the most amount of series, and then if you can get a sweep, you take it and run with it. Wisconsin is a bracket buster for me. I think they are a really, really scrappy team, and I think they played a really strong non-conference preseason. Again, they got beat up a little bit, but they're a team that never wavers. They are always under Coach Yvette. They're always super, super tough. Kayla Conwent, obviously coming back for, I think, year 7 or whatever it is now for her. She's been around forever. And yeah, that's another team that you just hate to play them. You hate to play the Badgers because they're gonna scratch, claw, find a way to win. And I think it's anyone's game when you line up against the Badgers.
Yeah, Wisconsin will open up at Michigan State, Big Ten play. Minnesota at Northwestern. That's one of the highlight marquee series of the weekend. There, of course, Wisconsin, Michigan State. Michigan State has a new head coach, Sharonda McDonald, taking over the program for Jackie Joseph, who retired. If Sharonda McDonald called you and asked for advice about the big life in the Big Ten, and she's been in the Big Ten before, she was an assistant at Ohio State, but what advice would you give Sharonda McDonald to being successful at East Lansing?
Oh man, I think she has a heck of a pitcher. She's got a great pitching staff. She brought in a lot of new talent, both freshmen and transfers. And I think To win in the Big Ten, I mean, it's the same old thing, right? You got to have pitching, you got to have offense, you got to have depth in your bullpen, especially with that cold weather, right? Where it's a very, very tough conference to play in because of the external elements that are thrown at you as a player. And I would say you have to take every series as an individual game, right? And you can't carry anything into the next weekend. It can snowball quickly, or you can kind of stop the bleeding when things get out of hand and regroup. And that's the biggest thing, not just in the Big Ten, but everywhere, obviously. But yeah, it's a tough conference to play in, but I'm really excited to see the style of this new Michigan State team. I haven't got to watch them as much in preseason as I would have liked. They came out. I thought they had a very impressive opening weekend. I think they're gonna find their footing a little bit, and it's probably going to be a rebuilding year. But I think big things to come there for that program.
Of course, the Big Ten tournament this year will be in Champaign. Illinois is the host. What's your thoughts on the Fighting Illini? Tyra Perry, the head coach, Laura Trout, the associate head coach. They got Sickles in the circle, made the tournament last year. Thoughts on Illinois this year?
They are the opposite of Ohio State for me. They are a team that relies through and through on their pitching, right? On their arms in the circle. You have Sickles, you have McQueen, you have Wiles. I mean, they live and die by their pitchers. And so I think for me, it's can they get their offense going in these 3-game series, right? Can they put some runs on the board and try to potentially shorten some innings for their pitchers? But they, despite as dominant as Sickles has been, they're splitting innings pretty evenly over there. And I think it's a really strong pitching staff, probably the most depth in terms of a true 1-2-3 punch. So yeah, they're always going to be tough to beat.
Of course, among the teams that didn't make the NCAA tournament, Indiana with Shonda Stanton, and they're a team that always attacks you in the base pads. They will open up against Maryland this weekend. Obviously, Rutgers, Kristen Butler. He's got a great player in Kylie Sand in there. Was all Big Ten performer. They got a lot of arms this year that they hope they can make a difference for them. Purdue obviously has got a lot of young talent there that they're trying to develop. A team like, obviously, Iowa. Renee Gillespie just picked up her 100th win in Tampa when they knocked off South Florida. They have a win against Mississippi State, took UCLA to the wire. Mandy Gardner is their new pitching coach. Really has helped develop their pitchers. Their ERA went from a 5 last year to a 2 so far in the non-conference. They open at Penn State with Bailey Partial, who really became a star last year and what she's done for Clarissa Crowell at Penn State. Of all those teams that didn't make the tournament I just brought up, is there one or two that you like that you think could surprise in the league and maybe be in the mix to make the NCAA tournament?
Off the bat, I have to go with Penn State because of their pitching depth. I mean, not just Bailey Partial, but Langenfelter as well. I mean, I think and they just have so much depth in their pitching staff. But for me, again, it's their offense, and Penn State and Rutgers are in the same boat for me. I haven't seen them play enough non-conference ranked opponents to really see how they're going to pan out in conference play. But off the bat, I think Coach Crowell is. I'm such a huge fan. What she's been able to do in that program, right? I mean, 2022 they had the single greatest turnaround in terms of winning percentage in all of Division I softball. I mean, it's just a ship that just continues to excel and meet the next standard that she has for them, and it's super impressive. But then again, you have a Rutgers that came out of nowhere. I mean, they were the only team to go unscathed in the opening weekend, 5-0 for the first time since like 1973 or something crazy. And similar to a Maryland, similar to an Indiana, right? They destroy you on the base pass. They never stop running. That they try to create chaos and havoc however they can. And they're Indiana. I mean, Coach Stanton and what she has asked her program to do every single year in terms of never backing down to their super highly competitive non-conference schedule. And yet again, they maintain their confidence. They're entering conference play 10-0, or the 10-0 in their last 10 games. They've got a extreme dual threat in Brianna Copeland. I'm interested to see if they have the pitching depth. I think that's going to be the biggest thing that hurts them. So out of the mix, I have to go with Penn State, just because I'm the most familiar with their game, I would say. But I'm really excited to get a closer look at Rutgers in the coming weeks.
Should be a lot of fun. We're speaking of Sammy Nettling here on In the Circle. Let's talk about you a little bit now. How did you? Let's first start at the beginning. You just met you're in Arizona. How does an Arizona girl end up in the Midwest and playing for Northwestern?
Yeah, I said I'm tired of playing in 120 degrees. I want to play in 20 degrees now. No, I had always liked the coaching staff. Honestly, the Drohan twins really sold me. They were the ones that got me hooked from the beginning. When I was growing up, my dad, when I finally said, okay, I want to do this, right? I think I really want to play collegiate softball, and I want to try to make it as far as I can. My dad said, okay, if that's the level you want to play at, we got to go watch it. So we had the Kajikawa in our backyard in Tempe. Obviously, I grew up a huge Arizona Wildcats fan, and he took me to the tournament out in Fullerton. He took me to Cathedral City, and we just went and watched college softball, and I got to get a feel for different programs from all across the country. I think that's the biggest thing growing up in Arizona. At the time that I was going through the recruiting process, you only had two Division I teams that had softball programs, Arizona and Arizona State. And obviously, if you could play for them, you could play for pretty much anyone in the country. And I was just extremely fortunate when I was going through the recruiting process. I was on a team that was pretty stacked. I played with Caleb Bonstrom, All-American at Stanford. I played with Katie Richardson, All-American at Minnesota. Gracie Golder played for the Bulldogs in Georgia before UCLA. And really, they were all getting recruited or had already committed, and I was kind of this young kid, and I happened to gain some attention from a couple twins that were wearing purple. And then I went on a visit, and I went in November, which was a terrible choice by Kate to have me go in November. But I loved it. It was just so different than anything that I was used to or had grown up around. The campus being so close to Chicago and everything. Yeah, it sold me. And somehow, even after I graduated, I've said, I really love the cold, apparently, because I'm still here. So, yeah, that's it. That's my story.
Well, maybe she had maybe that was the whole purpose. She wanted to test you by bringing you out in November and see if you really if you really liked it then you're good to go. I'm going to get you to here, put your analyst hat on. How does Sammy Nettling, the analyst, would describe Sammy Nettling, the player?
Oh, man, probably someone who, I don't know. I think I was bogged down by injuries a lot, and I never quite got my confidence back from that. Someone who I think cared a ton about the game and wanted nothing but to do the best that I could for my teammates, but could get burned by an inside pitch like nobody's business, could take a curveball to down right field. That was my bread and butter, but you could pretty much eat me alive on a high inside screwball. So yeah, it was a good time. It was a good time. It's been fun kind of being on the other side of the field, the other side of the coin, and getting to just extend my relationship with the sport. Honestly, it's been a lot of fun.
Was broadcasting always the plan, or how did that all come about?
Oh no, it was not. Yeah, I do this kind of very much on the side, if you will, but it was my first year out. It was 2019. I was trying to follow the Cats, obviously, and the only way you can do that is through broadcast and streaming, BTN Plus, all of this. And I remember just like listening to a broadcast, and there was a baseball guy that was the analyst. No offense to my baseball guys, but it really bothered me, kind of the way that they were calling the game. There's a lot of subtle differences. I think the biggest thing is as a softball player, you grow up watching baseball. As a baseball player, you don't necessarily grow up watching softball, right? So the game, it has some slight nuances, and I was essentially venting to my former coaches, to Kate and Carol, and in true Carol Drohan fashion, she said, "Okay, then you're going to call our next game if you think you can do so much better." And then I was humbled very quickly, and it was a lot. I did a game for BTN Plus, and it was so much harder than I ever thought. But I must have not done too terribly. The network called me up and they were like, "Hey, would you want to do a game for the actual network from there?" So yeah, that was kind of how it started. I did one game in 2019, 3 games in 2021, picked up really in 2022. I was able to do some in-studio analyst segments for them. And that was really kind of where I gained some traction. But been a whirlwind of the past couple of years. It was definitely not on my radar. Being in Chicago, living in the city, the network studios is right here in my backyard, so I'm very geographically convenient for them, which is great. And yeah, anytime I get to continue talking softball, talking shop, promoting the conference, I'm all for it.
Who'd you seek out for advice as you started to kind of tap your water into this? Because did you study this at all at school? You probably did. I mean, Northwestern's known for a great journalism school. Michael Wilbon, obviously the most famous one, but there's plenty. Brent Musburger, etc. Did you even study it at all, or was you really going in here on the fly?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. I guess like informal studying. I've watched sports my whole life, right? My dad played college football, my brother played college baseball for a little bit, my cousins, like everything. So there's always sports talk radios and a game on in my household growing up and now as an adult. So I really, my first time out, just tried to emulate what I had grown up watching. But in terms of actual individuals, I was really, really fortunate with the play-by-plays that I've been paired up with in my time. They've been very patient with me, and really just kind of shown me the ropes and giving me a lot of confidence in kind of how things are going. The Big Ten Network has an incredible, just an incredible network of talent. You think of Lisa Byington and Mike Hall and Rick Pizzo and Dave Revzine and Megan McEwen and I had an opportunity to call. My very first game was with Mike Monaco, who's now the fill-in play-by-play for the Boston Red Sox, and Chris Vosters, who's the main play-by-play for the Chicago Blackhawks. And yeah, I've just been extremely fortunate, truly, to just been carried by an unbelievable support cast throughout this whole thing, throughout this whole ride. All of my producers at the Big Ten are very, very patient with me. I ask a lot of questions. It's just like, I treat it just like playing, right? I record every segment. I go home. I'm as cringy as it is, I rewatch the film. It's
Or
pretty terrible most of the time, but I'm trying to do the best I can, not really having a background in it. And yeah, just trying to get better every opportunity that I have.
it can't be too bad. You got nominated by Extra Inning Softball for a Golden Mikes Award in a category. I'm trying to remember. It was either breakout or studio. I don't remember the category, but you were nominated there.
Yeah, somehow. Someone over there must, again, just extremely lucky this one. So I'll take it. I enjoy it. I've gotten good feedback from my friends and peers around the conference. And as long as the coaches are okay with me, as long as they don't totally hate the stuff that I'm putting out there, I'll take that as a win.
What's the biggest thing you've learned as you enter now 2023 season that you didn't know at the beginning? What are a couple things you've learned now that you didn't know maybe say about a couple years ago?
Yeah, I would say just like the actual production of it all is incredible, and the amount of people and hours that goes into what we as consumers at home just flip on and get to enjoy, right? It's pretty unbelievable. And you think about these the talent out there that does this for a living, right? Like this is their career, and the ones that are just that we've just grown to feel that they're tied to the game, right? When I think of college softball and the Women's College World Series, I think of Beth Moen's voice, right? When I think of college football, I think of Kirk Herbstreit, right? And again, all of these incredible talent that just elevates the sports that they're around. It's crazy, and I think it's been so fun the past couple of years to see the talent in terms of analysts and softball specifically grow and continue to invest in former athletes and give them a platform after they're done playing, or even the ones that are still playing, right, for AU and in the NPF and the WPF. It's awesome. So I don't think I really, again, when I was just a consumer myself of sports content and a game watcher and a fan, I don't think I ever really sat back to really think about the time and the effort that it takes to actually put on the screen what we're getting to see. So yeah, it's crazy world.
It's crazy world, right? You've done studio and you've done the analyst role. Compared doing studio versus being in the booth for a game.
Yeah, they're super different. The game, there's just so much prep work that goes into the game because you gotta know in 1 through 25 inside and out, right, for both teams. So it's a lot, especially when you have multiple different games in a weekend. So you're having to prep for 4 teams or 6 teams. Again, I think about the crews that do the regionals specifically, and they have to go and all of a sudden learn 4 teams that they may have not seen all season long, and they have a week to learn them again inside and out, all 50 games in a season. It's crazy. And it's the game is really interesting because you have all this prep work that again is on the players and the coaches and the programs and the history and the story that their season is, but then you also have like what's actually physically happening within the actual game. So that part is it's an interesting dynamic, and the production that goes into the timing of when you can speak, and not when you can speak, but when you should speak, right, for the most optimal experience for the viewer, right? It's a lot. There's a lot going on. And again, I've been super fortunate with my play-by-plays who have been very, very patient with me. And then the studio, I think, comes a little bit more naturally to me just because I feel like I'm kind of just like this, right? I'm asking, I've been asked questions. I just get to talk the game, right? Talk my feelings, talk my thoughts. And somehow someone said, we care about those thoughts and those opinions, and we're going to give you a mic to say it instead of you just talking in your living room. So yeah, it's funny. They're super, super different. There's still a lot of prep that goes into the studio, but just a very, very different feel in terms of it being a bit more conversational, a bit more lax in terms of where the conversation and the discussion can go, versus the game and just the prep work. Because again, you want to make sure that you're representing the programs the way that they want to be represented, the way that athletes want to be represented, as genuinely and authentically as you can. So yeah, a lot of homework that goes into both, though.
Yeah, well, I just looked it up. You're the best studio analyst nominee, extra innings there. So, do you like studio more than the booth? Or do you like? I mean, how would you, if you had, how do you like one more than the other?
I really do enjoy both. Again, I think it's a little bit more natural for me in the studio because there's less of the production. There's less of the commercials in and out. I've got a segment, I've got a set amount of time, and I just get to speak. I've got the questions beforehand. I pretty much know kind of how it's going to go, versus the game. You have no idea how it's going to go. Which again is also the appeal. It's also like the challenge, which is why I like it. I think right now I'm also more comfortable because I've had more studio opportunities just in the past year than I have games. I think I've only called like 7 total games in my career. I'm getting 6 this season, which is doubling my numbers, which is pretty crazy. So yeah, it kind of depends. Flip of the coin, which one? because then also you get a really intense game. I had the opportunity to call the Nebraska Michigan opening doubleheader of Big Ten's last year, which was
Oh wow, I remember that.
Yeah, unbelievable series. So then yeah, you get that like adrenaline rush when you're calling the game and something crazy happens and you get to just narrate it and help tell the story to the viewers at home. So both of them have their things that I like for sure.
If I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, that series was on BTN, also on FS1, I want to
Yeah,
say.
I actually call that one for FS1. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. I'm a broadcasting geek, so I always follow this stuff, and I was fascinated, from that standpoint, that to see you in that landscape. Do you block that out when you know you're on an FS1, you're on BTN? Because you mentioned you started out at BTN Plus. Well, how long did it take you to get comfortable knowing, hey, there's a lot of people, watching what I'm about to say, and a responsibility that we all have as broadcasters, and especially in your case, you're representing the Big Ten. You played in the league, so probably part of you is like, I want to make sure this league and the players and the coaches are represented a certain way, the right way. How do you kind of manage all that?
It reminds me a lot of when I was playing and I would get like media opportunities and questions, right? I'm an extension at that point of Northwestern University and the athletic department and the softball program. And to your point, I think of it the same way when I'm an analyst. And we have the opportunity typically to speak with the coaches before each game a little bit, get a little insight into where their head's at for the upcoming weekend. And I think that's the part that I value the most from my prep work, because that's the part where, again, I really get to feel like I want to tell the story that you want to be told. I want to tell the story that your athletes want us to tell. And I feel like I have a little bit of a leg up because a lot of these coaches, again, I was around for so long and got to feel a little bit for their style of play. But yeah, it is a lot. I do take a lot of, I take a lot of pride in it, but I also I hold myself accountable, and it is a bigger responsibility, which is why I always go back and try to be probably hypercritical over what I said and how I said it, and how could I have also promoted this athlete a little bit better, and maybe critiqued it in a different way, because I also remember what it was like to be on the flip side of the coin, right? When you don't have your best stuff that day, and potentially an analyst like picks you apart a little bit, right? And obviously it's part of the game where that's our job is to give some insights into what may be potentially happening to viewers at home that may not have the previous inside experience to the sport. But yeah, I take a lot of great pride in it. It's definitely a delicate balance, and I think with every opportunity I'm getting more comfortable with that responsibility, etc. But yeah, it can be a lot for sure.
I'm curious. Do you watch your peers? Do you watch a Jenny Ritter, for example, obviously in your own network, who's done it for so long, or maybe even a Kinsey Fowler over at Pac-12, or a Scarborough at ESPN? Do you watch them and you kind of observe as well and take notes as well, and just kind of not to copy them, but to take notes and like, oh, that's interesting. I never thought of that. Do you, or maybe reach out to any of them?
For sure. I just think I've been really blessed with like really great people in my circle for some way, somehow. But I went to high school with Maddie Fowler, Kenzie's sister.
Oh,
Kelly Fowler was my high school and travel ball coach for a lot of years. So Kenzie was honestly one of the first people that I reached out to be like, what is this world? And how can I try to make the most of it? Maddie picks up some games with Nate Rohr and the big red network out there. But yeah, I've had a lot of opportunity to pick their brains, and I definitely am like you said, I'm a broadcast geek now. I'm not just a sports fan. I really geek out over the little bits of the production now. I loved watching last year's World Series with the two different broadcasts that you could kind of go back and forth between. I definitely have some favorites that I try to consume their content as much as I can. So yeah, I really take a lot of pride in being a student of this craft that I really knew nothing about, and I am slowly uncovering more and more. Because again, I want to do it as good of a job as I can with the time that I have to give to it. And again, just tell the story of the Big Ten Conference and the athletes that we have as best that I can.
Obviously, as you do games, even in studio, you're going to be paired up with different hosts or different play-by-play people. You could feel free to mention some of the names you've worked with, and it does. But there's an adjustment because everybody has their own style. What has that been like for you to adapt to a particular play-by-play person? It might be a little different style than the other play-by-play you might work, or a studio host that might have a different style than another studio host.
For sure, I think I'm the annoying athlete that in my like day job, I relate everything back to athletics. So to me, it's just like, okay, this is my new teammate, right? And I got to figure it out, right? We're working together. We maybe paired up as if, you know, again, when I was catching and I got a new pitcher, we got to figure it out. What do you want? What works best for me, et cetera. But every single person that I've worked with in that capacity, the other talent across from me at the desk or on the call has been a absolute pro. And so I think more so they adjust their style to me, which is pretty hilarious because again, they know I'm the newbie. I ask a ton of questions. I am not afraid to play the newbie card. And everyone has just been super supportive of me, but also when I love feedback. I ask every single person after a broadcast or a segment, you know, what did you think of that? How can I get better? And for them, it's their day job, right? So it's just another segment. They a lot of times don't even really think of it when they have different talent coming in and out. And for the talent, specifically for me, that doesn't really operate in this space on a regular basis, I'm like hypercritical of myself where I pick up on things that other people may not. But yeah, it is definitely an adjustment. I definitely see the appeal, you know, when I kind of get in a rhythm with someone. Like when I was calling with Chris Foster's, we called three days in a row together, and that was again by day 3. Like we were really in a rhythm. It was a lot of fun. Same thing with my call last year in the Big Ten tournament. We did the majority of the game breaks and the post game shows together. And again, you're just in the studio talking the game. You're collaborating in person versus you know, kind of coming in when everyone has different time and piecing the broadcast together. So there's definitely an advantage to it, but it is just a lot of fun to get to work with a wide range of people that do this on a daily basis and are just absolute pros at their field.
You're still young in this, so you got a lot of time to kind of think about what you want to do. Is this something? Have you thought about maybe, hey, would I be interested in doing, for example, baseball? Like Elise Menaker, obviously, who's your colleague, Big Ten Network, does the sideline with the Chicago Cubs on the side, for example. Jessica Mendoza, obviously, is an analyst now in Major League Baseball. There's others that have done sideline and other. Is that something that would interest you at all? Or are you just locked in and just say you just want to do softball?
It's a great question. I haven't really thought of it, honestly, because I kind of am still surprised every single time they ask me to come back to do softball. So I don't really give it much thought. I feel like I'm going to jinx it. But yeah, I would definitely never say no to the opportunity. Again, it would be a whole new learning curve. I think the thing that I hold my hat on, if you will, when it comes to this whole thing, because I'm so new, because I didn't study this, because a lot of times I very much feel like a fish out of water. It's that I know this game and I know this conference. So that's kind of how, like, what I have as my foundation. But I would love to do baseball. I would love to do basketball. I played a lot of sports growing up. But again, then I just look at the people that do like all of the sports, all of the things. Elise is a great one. Megan McEwen, Emily Eman, my Northwestern, my former Northwestern Wildcat friends. The breadth that they do across the sport and the play-by-plays as well, right? When you have to flip back and forth between not just different sports, but different types of sports, right? Lisa Byington goes from doing women's basketball in college to WNBA to the Bucks, and then comes back and helps us with Big Ten softball. Like, it's crazy. And the amount of prep work that goes into every single one of those engagements is unbelievable. So I would never say no to it. I can't envision what that would look like for me at this point. probably also because I'm just very much trying to wrap my head around. They asked me back for a year 2 of studio and more games. But yeah, I love sports. I'm a sports geek. So getting the opportunity to potentially make a career over talking sports, like, that sounds amazing.
It's the best life, ain't it? Trust me, it's not too bad. We could, they pay us for it, so that's the cool thing about it. It's pretty fun on that. Let's talk about your expanded role this year. What can people expect this year on BTN as far as the softball coverage?
Yeah, I think we got an increased coverage this year, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to see. So I've got 6 games so far through April that we kind of tell the story as it goes. But it's also, I mean, the Big Ten is a highly competitive spring sport conference. So we're also balancing, obviously, baseball and then lacrosse as well. Like there's a lot going on here in the Midwest. But yeah, I'm excited to get a couple more games under my belt. I think I'll effectively double my total after the end of the season, if not more. And yeah, hopefully some more regular studio segments, previewing weekends, recapping weekends, etc. And trying to tell a story for a national visibility to get as many teams as we can into NCAAs.
And that'll start this weekend. We're gonna get to hear you this weekend.
Yeah, we got Maryland at Indiana lined up on Saturday, and then going home to Evanston, Minnesota at Northwestern on Sunday. So I'm pretty excited.
That's pretty good. Get 2 Big Ten games this weekend, folks. Check it out, Big Ten Network. Where can they find you on social media too? Because I'm sure you'll be posting from there as well, and people can keep track where you're at.
Yeah, at Sammy Net, at Instagram and Twitter. I try to keep the same across all platforms, make it nice and easy for folks. So yeah.
Last question for Team Blank. Whoever wins the Big Ten, they will have to do what?
They have to have a 2 pitcher that can pitch complete games, in my opinion. I think that is really going to be the difference that sets people apart, which is why I think, again, looking at kind of the discussion we had at Northwestern, why I don't think they're out by any means, despite only having 13 wins on the year. That is going to be the biggest thing. Can you have a 2 that can legitimately take a full second game from your 1 to put you in the best potential position to get a sweep? Because the team that gets the most sweeps this year is going to be the team that wins. It's going to be few and far between, and I think that's really going to be the biggest difference in the Big Ten Conference this year.
All right, we're excited to get going. Big Ten coverage this weekend. Big Ten softball starts this weekend. Sammy Nettling, she'll be in studio. She'll be doing analyst, as she mentioned this weekend. Catch her there all season long. This was fun to have you on. I know it's going to get a lot busier schedule for you, so I really do appreciate you as you get ready for your games there. We hope to have you on between now and maybe the Big Ten tournament and talk some Big Ten softball. But in the meantime, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to hearing you on the air this season.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it.